Caroline Munro stood near the edge of the foyer, flawless in a dove-gray silk gown that had cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Her posture was perfect. Her smile was tight. And inside, she was utterly, exhaustingly bored. A server offered her a flute of sparkling rosé. She took it, not because she wanted it, but because it gave her something to do with her hands. Around her, city council members, developers, and curated socialites exchanged empty pleasantries dressed up as charm. They all knew her. They all owed her something. That was the curse of being a woman like Caroline Munro in Charleston. Admired, envied, needed, but never known. She checked the time on her phone, thumb grazing over a news alert she didn't bother reading. Her assistant, Maeve, was late. And the older she got, the more she loathed waiting. She glanced across the room, saw Miriam Blake throwing her a smile that felt more like a challenge than a greeting, and decided, absolutely not. Not tonight. She turned, heels quiet against the tile, and slipped through the hallway marked staff only. She needed a mirror. Just 5 minutes alone. Maybe a breath that didn't smell like cloying perfume or someone else's agenda. Caroline pushed open a door marked Women and sighed as the heavy wood closed behind her. The restroom was empty, lit by soft sconces and lined with dark green tile. Elegant. Private. A refuge. She moved to the sink, set down her glass, and stared at her reflection. Her hair was perfect, pulled into a sleek chignon. Her earrings shimmered, emeralds, her favorite. But something in her expression was off, a sadness she hadn't invited. A quiet fatigue. She dabbed under her eyes with a tissue and muttered, "Get it together." A sudden voice startled her. Excuse me?" Caroline froze. The voice came from the last stall. Male. Hesitant. "Can you pass me some toilet paper?" She blinked, frowning. Was this a prank? "Sorry," the voice added. "I know how this sounds, but there's none in here, and—" "Yeah." Caroline looked around, half expecting a camera crew to jump out. "Are you aware you're in the ladies' room?" A pause. "Yes, now I am." She didn't move. "And that doesn't bother you?" "Honestly, what bothers me is being stuck here with no toilet paper." She stared at the stall door. Was this real? "Let me get this straight. You waltzed into the wrong bathroom and now you're hoping someone will bail you out?" "You're making it sound a lot more glamorous than it was. It was the meds. I get migraines." "I wasn't really paying attention." Caroline crossed her arms. "You're asking a stranger, one who clearly has a reputation to protect, to pass you toilet paper. Ma'am, if I had an ounce of pride left, I lost it 5 minutes ago." She wanted to be annoyed. Truly. But the absurdity of it cracked something in her. "You do realize you're probably ruining my evening," she said. "I think that ship sailed the moment I walked in here and realized all the shoes outside the stalls were heels." She laughed. Softly, against her will. "You think this is funny?" she asked. "No, I think it's humiliating. But if I don't laugh, I'll cry. Please, just help me out." Caroline walked over to the paper roll by the second stall. She tore off a few sheets, folded them, then paused. "What's in it for me?" she teased. "Excuse me?" "Your desperation doesn't exactly scream bargaining power." The man sighed. "How about this? I'm performing tonight at the Garden Benefit downtown. I can give you backstage access, VIP, free tickets." Caroline squinted toward the stall. "You're a musician?" Ben Callahan. That name sparked something faint in her memory. Didn't he win a Grammy for folk music years ago? She smiled. So now you're bribing me. Desperation breeds creativity. She crouched and slid the paper under the stall door. Here, your Royal Highness of Awkward. Oh, thank God. You're a lifesaver. Caroline backed away, amused and unsettled. She turned to leave just as the stall door creaked open. No, no, wait. His voice was urgent again. Can you do me one more favor? She turned back, raising a brow. Can you leave first? If we both walk out together, it's going to look, well, worse. She laughed. Worse than what? That you barged into a bathroom and charmed your way out with a free pass? I'm not charming. I'm begging. She studied him as he adjusted a plain black cap low over his forehead. He was older than she expected. Maybe her age. Rougher around the edges, like someone who'd lived without apologies. And yet, there was something boyish about the way he avoided her gaze. All right, she said. I'll go. She stepped into the hallway, smirk still on her lips. The air was cooler now, and a few guests were already wandering back from intermission. She slipped into the crowd as if nothing had happened, just a woman returning from the powder room. Then it happened. A small cluster of whispers, heads turning, a murmur spreading like a ripple through the room. And there he was, Ben Callahan, emerging from the women's restroom, adjusting his cap like it might somehow make him invisible. Miriam Blake gasped. Is that... Oh my goodness, someone else whispered. He came out of the ladies' room. Right after her. Caroline's heart dropped into her heels. Ben noticed the crowd, too. The whispering. The eyes. And in a flash of entirely unhelpful instinct, he looked straight at Caroline. Their eyes met. It was done. The crowd surged. Phones came out. Someone said her name. Someone else said his. A teenage girl gasped. That's Ben Callahan! He's with her! Is that his girlfriend? Caroline's pulse raced. Her glass was still in her hand, trembling slightly. She turned, ready to disappear, to melt into the floor, to rewind the last 5 minutes of her life, and pretend none of it happened. Instead, Ben did the unthinkable. He walked toward her. She whispered through gritted teeth as he approached. You just made my life a headline. He smiled, casual, utterly at ease. I prefer music, but I hear gossip sells. And with that, the cameras clicked. Flash, flash, questions. Laughter. The whole night had just shifted from elegant to viral in less than 30 seconds. Caroline didn't move. She simply raised her glass, downed the rest of the rosé, and muttered, I knew I should have stayed home. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The morning sun slipped through the sheer curtains of Caroline Munro's penthouse, casting soft light across her kitchen's marble counters. The espresso machine hummed. She didn't hear it. Her phone buzzed again. She stared at the screen in disbelief. A photo, again. The same one. This time with a headline stamped across the bottom in bold serif. Millionaire Caroline Munro spotted leaving women's restroom. Moments before Grammy winner emerges. Coincidence? Caroline let out a long, breathless sigh. She hadn't even finished her first coffee, and she was already trending. Maeve's text followed. We need to talk. ASAP. She closed her eyes, set the phone down, and tried not to scream. The city could call her ruthless, brilliant, polished. But what she was now, apparently, was scandalous. All because of a moment. A stranger. A paper roll. And the stupidest 10 minutes of her year. Another buzz. She didn't check it. Instead, she walked to the window, watching Charleston wake up below her. The city felt different this morning. Like it was watching her, waiting for her next move. And for the first time in a long time, Caroline didn't know what that move should be. The intercom crackled. Maeve's voice filtered through. "I'm coming up." Of course she was. 30 seconds later, the elevator doors opened and Maeve strode in like a woman on a mission. Her tablet already in hand, her espresso untouched. "You've gone viral," she announced without pleasantry. 4 blogs. 2 local outlets. 1 syndicated entertainment site. The video's already got 50,000 views and climbing. "There's a video?" Caroline asked, as if the universe hadn't done enough already. "Of course there's a video," Maeve said, swiping quickly. "You walking out, looking stunning. Him coming out looking like a lost roadie. Then the flash of recognition between you two. It's cinematic." Caroline dragged her hand down her face. "Cinematic is not the goal, Maeve. Dignity is." "Too late," Maeve said, spinning the tablet around. "Look." Caroline hesitated, then watched. There she was. Cool, composed, the gala lighting hitting her like she'd rehearsed her entrance. Then Ben Callahan, wearing a cap and confusion, emerging from the women's restroom like a guilty schoolboy. Their eyes met. The crowd whispered. Phones rose, and then, freeze frame. A blogger's voiceover. Is Charleston's most powerful woman hiding a secret romance? Caroline didn't blink. "Please tell me you're already fixing this." "I'm trying. But Ben's team already issued a no comment." She raised an eyebrow. "He has a team?" Maeve nodded. "Publicist, manager, and apparently a sister who handles his calendar. He's performing at a fundraiser tonight on the riverfront. And from what I gather, he's not thrilled about the attention either." Caroline turned back to the window. "Wonderful. So now I'm the punchline to a man who couldn't find the right bathroom." Maeve hesitated. "Actually, you're not the punchline. You're the lead." Caroline turned. "What?" "The story isn't mocking you. It's romanticizing you." Caroline nearly choked. "Excuse me. They're calling you the mystery woman, the elegant enigma, the Charleston queen of grace under fire." She blinked. Have people lost their minds? Maeve tilted her head. "You went viral for handing toilet paper to a stranger. And somehow the world thinks it was flirtation. It was hygiene. America loves a glamorous meet-cute. This is their catnip." Caroline groaned, pacing now. "What do they want from me? A TikTok duet? A perfume line called Emergency Roll?" Maeve didn't laugh. She just lowered her voice. "Elena Ruiz reached out." Caroline paused. "Who?" "Ben Callahan's publicist." Caroline's shoulders tightened. She said Ben's uncomfortable with the attention and wants to manage the narrative. She suggested a solution. "I'm afraid to ask." Maeve glanced at her screen. A casual joint appearance. Somewhere public. A dinner, maybe. Just to ease the noise. Let people see it's not some secret tryst. A united front. Caroline folded her arms. A staged dinner with a man who doesn't know which restroom to use. Maeve gave a tiny shrug. It's either that, or let the media make up a dozen more headlines. Silence hung in the room for a long moment. Caroline sipped her espresso. It had gone cold. Then quietly, "If I do this, I pick the restaurant. And I set the time." Maeve smiled faintly. "Understood." By sunset, the Bistro La Mer was filled with soft jazz and the scent of roasted rosemary chicken. Caroline sat at a corner table under a low-hanging lantern, the glow casting elegant shadows on her cheekbones. She had dressed with precision. Simple black, clean lines, no flash. Controlled. Neutral. Unreadable. At 7:06, Ben Callahan arrived. He paused at the entrance. No cap tonight. No casual denim. A navy jacket over a white linen shirt. He looked respectable, not polished, but sincere. He spotted her. Smiled slightly like he wasn't sure if he should. She didn't smile back. He walked over and sat. Thanks for agreeing to this. I didn't do it for you, she said, unfolding her napkin. I did it for my reputation. He chuckled. Fair enough. A pause. The clink of silverware nearby. I'm not used to this kind of attention, he added. Neither am I, she replied. And I've spent 20 years trying to avoid it. Their eyes met. I want to apologize, he said quietly. For the bathroom? She asked. For everything that came after. She softened. Barely. Apology accepted. A server appeared, placed menus down, then stepped away with an awkward glance. Caroline knew he recognized them. The whole restaurant probably did. Ben leaned in slightly. So, how do we look? Caroline sipped her wine. Like two strangers trying very hard not to look like two strangers. He smiled. Well, that's accurate. Another silence. Not uncomfortable, but expectant. Finally, she said, I looked you up. Oh? 3 albums. 1 Grammy. Then, nothing. For 5 years, he exhaled. Yeah. Life happened. My father passed. I took care of my mother. Had a few health scares of my own. Took a step back. Now I'm stepping back in, I guess. She watched him. Must be strange. Coming back into the spotlight like this. He nodded. Stranger still to do it from a women's restroom. She laughed. Not a performance. A real laugh. Unexpected and short. Ben smiled. That's the first time I've heard you laugh. Don't get used to it. The server returned. They ordered. The conversation stayed light. Music, cities, how Charleston had changed. She asked about his songwriting. He asked about real estate trends. Neither asked why they were both still alone. Then, as dessert arrived, he said something that shifted the air. I know this isn't real. She looked up. This dinner, this story, it's theater, but I've seen enough to know when someone's performing. You're not. She froze. I think you've been performing for so long, he added. You forgot there's a difference. Her throat tightened. You don't know me, she said. I'd like to, he said simply. The check arrived. Caroline signed it before he could reach. He raised an eyebrow. You don't let people do things for you, do you? She stood, sliding her clutch under her arm. Not unless they come bearing toilet paper. He smiled again, but she didn't. Not until they stepped outside, and the first flash of a camera lit up the sidewalk. Then she turned to him, leaned close, and whispered through a tight smile. Smile, Mr. Callahan. You've just survived our first date. The next morning, Caroline stood in front of her closet, coffee in hand, robe still cinched tight at her waist. Dozens of designer outfits stared back at her. Tailored suits, silk blouses, pristine dresses. She'd worn them all like armor for years, but today, every hanger felt like a costume. Maeve's voice floated in from the kitchen. You're due at the harborfront in an hour. Fundraiser luncheon, and Elena Ruiz is requesting a call before you go. Caroline didn't answer. She just sipped her coffee and kept staring at the rack like it might blink first. Last night had unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite admit. Ben had been sincere. Disarming, funny, and worse, honest. She hadn't expected him to see her. Not really. Not with that line. "You've been performing so long, you forgot there's a difference." That had landed harder than she let on. She picked a crisp ivory blouse and soft tan trousers, elegant but not severe, approachable. Strategic, her version of vulnerable. By the time she entered the kitchen, Maeve had already packed her tote, programmed her calendar, and laid out the morning paper on the counter. Caroline caught a glimpse of the headline: "Monroe and Callahan, Power Meets Poetry at La Mer." She flipped it over without a word. Maeve arched a brow. "They're calling it electric." They would call a power outage electric if it meant more clicks. "Ben handled himself well," Maeve said. Warm, composed, gracious. Even made a joke about restrooms during the walkout. The crowd loved it. Caroline reached for her bag. "I wasn't looking for love, just damage control." Maeve followed her to the elevator. "Maybe. But damage control doesn't usually end with that look on your face." "What look?" Maeve just smiled. "Exactly." The Charleston Harbor Club was already buzzing when Caroline arrived. Crystal water shimmered just beyond the glass balcony. Inside, socialites floated from table to table like sequined butterflies. The benefit was for arts education, and everyone knew Caroline's foundation had written one of the biggest checks. She moved through the crowd with effortless poise, nodding, smiling, engaging with the practiced elegance of a woman who'd lived half her life in rooms like this. But she felt the shift. Every eye that landed on her lingered. Every smile stretched just a little too wide. Conversations paused half a second longer than necessary. And then Ben arrived. She didn't see him at first. But she heard the change, a ripple in the room. Then a voice, warm and clear, cut through the quiet. "Well, this place is fancier than I remember." She turned. Ben stood near the entrance, charcoal jacket open, no tie, eyes scanning the room. He looked completely out of place, and entirely comfortable being so. And then he saw her. For a moment, no one else existed. He walked over, offering a cautious smile. "You look efficient." She blinked. "Efficient?" Like someone who could charm a donor and negotiate a federal budget before dessert. "I'll take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. A pause. The clink of forks and champagne glasses around them. He lowered his voice. "Thank you for last night. I know it wasn't easy." "You were less of a disaster than I expected," he chuckled. Again, high praise. Before she could reply, a woman's voice cut in, smooth and calculated. "Caroline, darling. Miriam Blake." Caroline turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miriam!" Miriam, draped in a navy wrap dress and pearls, offered a quick kiss on the cheek. "So glad you could make it. And I see, Mr. Callahan is with you." Ben extended a hand. "Pleasure." Miriam took it, but her eyes stayed on Caroline. "The city's been buzzing." "You always did know how to make an entrance." Caroline's voice was syrupy smooth. "I prefer to let others do the buzzing." "Well," Miriam said, glancing at the photographers drifting near the stage, "keep buzzing, and they might rename the harbor after you." Caroline held her gaze. "Only if I buy it first." Ben looked between them, amused. Miriam turned with a smile. "Do enjoy the luncheon." As she glided away, Ben leaned in. "Friend of yours?" "Charleston's unofficial gatekeeper." Loves control. Despises unpredictability. So basically, we're her worst nightmare. She'll recover. Ben nodded toward the small stage. "You're speaking?" Caroline shook her head. "Donating quietly." He looked surprised. "Why?" "I believe in impact, not applause." Ben studied her for a beat. "You know, that's the first thing you've said that doesn't sound rehearsed." She turned to him, defenses flickering. "You think I'm performing again?" "I think you've built a very convincing character. I'm just trying to find the script." Before she could respond, a server passed with a tray of sparkling water. Ben took one, handed her another. "I meant what I said," he added. "I know this story started weird, but I'd like to know you." Past the headlines, past the armor. She looked at the water, not drinking. "Why?" "Because I think there's more to you than even you admit." A beat passed. Then, with a voice so soft she barely heard herself say it, "Be careful. Curiosity's expensive." He smiled. "I don't mind the cost." After the luncheon, Caroline walked along the harbor path, heels in hand. The crowd had thinned. Photographers had left. The wind carried the smell of salt and jasmine. She heard his steps before he spoke. "You walk fast," Ben said, catching up. "I think better in motion." "Then this must be where the real you hides." She stopped. Turned. The city stretched behind them, pastel buildings, cobbled streets, a horizon blurred by haze. "I've worked too hard to be defined by a bathroom mistake," she said. "I'm not trying to define you." "No? Then why are you here? Really?" Ben looked out over the water. "I've spent the last few years fading. Grief, sickness, silence. I let the world go quiet around me. And somehow, this," he gestured vaguely, "this chaos woke something up." She didn't answer. "I'm not saying I believe in fate," he added. "But maybe wrong doors sometimes open into the right rooms." She laughed, quiet, unexpected. "Now who sounds rehearsed?" he grinned. "I'm a songwriter, comes with the job." Caroline stared at him. At the way his smile didn't demand anything. At the way the moment felt. Still. Then, softly. "If this is a performance, Ben, don't forget it ends." He shook his head. "Maybe, but some performances become real if you stay in the scene long enough." She held his gaze, heart thudding. The silence stretched, gentle, suspended. Then her phone buzzed. She looked. A message from Wyatt Green. "Saw the lunch coverage. You've still got the city eating out of your hand. Call me sometime." It's been a while. She slipped the phone back into her bag, and when she looked up, Ben was still watching her. Not with expectation, just patience. Maybe too much patience. She nodded toward the path. "Walk with me." He fell into step beside her. Neither spoke for a while. The only sound was the wind, the water, and the soft rhythm of two people learning how to move in sync, without knowing where the road would take them. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The scent of rain lingered in the Charleston air, softening the late afternoon heat. The clouds had parted just in time for the Riverfront Music Benefit, a local event blending community charm with high society performance. String lights were strung between oak trees, swaying gently, as if whispering secrets to the breeze. A crowd was already gathering beneath them, a mix of locals and legacy donors sipping wine and pretending not to scan the guest list. Caroline arrived just past 6. Her car door held open by a valet, who knew her name without needing to ask. She stepped out in a slate blue dress that moved like water, understated, but impossible to ignore. As she walked toward the heart of the event, every head seemed to turn. Not because of her outfit, but because of the undercurrent that had followed her for days. The bathroom, the dinner, the walk by the harbor. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had a theory, and no one had a clue. Maeve met her near the reception tent, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider and a face full of strategic calm. "You're late," she said, passing her a glass. "I was avoiding pre-show speculation." "Well, you failed. You're the unofficial headliner." Caroline took a sip, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Where is he?" "Sound check. Backstage." "And yes," Maeve added, reading her mind, "you look composed. Terrifyingly so." "I'm not trying to look terrifying." "You're not trying not to either." Caroline cracked a faint smile, the kind only Maeve could pull from her in moments like this. Then she saw him. Ben. He stepped out from behind the small outdoor stage, guitar slung casually over one shoulder, dressed in a soft gray button-up rolled at the sleeves. No jacket. No tie, just him, effortlessly present. Their eyes met across the lawn. He smiled. She didn't. Not because she didn't want to, but because smiling felt like admitting too much in front of too many people. And tonight, people were watching. As if summoned by tension itself, Miriam Blake appeared at her side. "Well," Miriam said smoothly, "it seems the rumors have legs, and now they sing." Caroline didn't even turn. "Miriam, Caroline." A pause passed between them. Then, "You do know the whispers aren't all flattering, don't you?" Miriam asked. Caroline took another sip of her cider. "I'm aware of how Charleston operates. Are you also aware that Wyatt Green's column is running a feature tomorrow? Something about reinvention in high society?" Caroline blinked. He didn't ask for comment. Apparently, he didn't need one. Miriam offered a smirk and drifted away, satisfied with the tremor she'd left behind. Maeve exhaled beside her. "She's wound tighter than her pearls." Caroline glanced toward the stage again. "Let her speculate. Everyone else is." "You know you don't have to stay long tonight," Maeve said gently. "Just be seen, smile, leave. I'll stay," Caroline said. "Let them see what they want to see." The sky turned lavender as the evening settled in. Lanterns flickered. The buzz of conversation dropped when Ben stepped on stage. He adjusted the mic, tapped it once, then looked up, squinting into the lights. "Hi there." The crowd offered polite applause. "I was going to sing a few favorites," he began, "but I figured since Charleston has such a strong appreciation for unexpected moments, I'd open with something new." Laughter rippled through the audience. Caroline's spine straightened. Ben looked toward her, only for a second, but it was enough to quiet the entire lawn. "This one's called Wrong Turn." She inhaled. The first chords were simple, slow, delicate. Then his voice carried across the night, low and warm like aged bourbon. "I walked through the wrong door. I wasn't thinking clear, I asked the wrong question. But you happened to be near. And in a world full of maybes, you were strangely sure that helping a stranger didn't need a cure." Caroline's hand tightened around her glass. Now they're whispering stories in the back of the hall. They're calling it something, but they don't know it all. 'Cause the truth isn't headlines or flashes of light. It's finding someone who makes wrong turns feel right. There was a stillness in the crowd now. A kind of suspended emotion no one wanted to break. Maeve whispered, "That song's about you." Caroline didn't respond. Her throat had gone dry. Ben played the final note, let it hang, then gave a modest nod and stepped away from the mic. Applause erupted. He didn't bask in it. He didn't wave or smile theatrically. He simply left the stage, quiet, unhurried, and walked toward her. He stopped just a few feet away, not touching her, not pushing. "I figured," he said softly, "if people are going to make up a story, they might as well have a better one to tell." Caroline swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was low and strained. "You think that helped?" "I think it was the first honest thing either of us has said in public. You put me in that song." He nodded. "Because you were there when I didn't know which way was out." She turned away slightly. The emotions were rising too fast, too visible. She didn't like it. She never had. He didn't press. Just added, "There's a part of you that wants to be seen, Caroline, even if it terrifies you." Her eyes flicked back to his. "You don't know what terrifies me. Maybe not. But I know what moves you." A pause. She whispered, "You shouldn't assume." "I don't have to," he said. "You're still standing here." Later, as the crowd thinned and lanterns swayed low in the night breeze, Caroline sat alone on a bench near the stage. The grass was damp, the scent of lemon from a nearby tree faint but comforting. Footsteps approached. She didn't look up. Ben sat beside her, not too close, just near enough. "I wasn't trying to make a scene," he said. "You didn't. The scene made itself." They sat in silence. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded napkin. "What's this?" she asked. "Insurance." She unfolded it. A song lyric scribbled hastily. "I wasn't looking. You weren't waiting. But sometimes the best stories don't ask permission." Caroline looked at the paper. Then at him. And for the first time that night, her voice softened. "You're very persistent. I'm very curious." She held his gaze. The pause between them wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was quiet, deep. The kind that makes a person wonder whether they're about to make a mistake or finally step into something real. And then she folded the napkin, slipped it into her clutch, and stood. "You want to know me?" she said. He nodded. "Then follow me, but don't expect easy." "I never do." She began to walk, heels clicking against stone. And he followed. No cameras, no stage, no applause. Just footsteps, steady, unscripted, together. Caroline had never invited a man into her home on a whim. Not even in her youth, when charm often blurred the line between caution and curiosity. But as Ben stepped into the foyer of her penthouse, his hands respectfully in his coat pockets, she realized this was no whim. It was something else. Something quieter and far more dangerous. She gestured toward the living room. "You can sit. Or not. I'm not offering a tour." Ben took in the space without a word. The room was elegant, spacious, flooded with city lights from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Art hung on the walls. Originals, not prints. Each piece curated, precise, intentionally placed. Much like the woman who lived there. "I expected something colder," he said finally. She raised a brow. "You thought I lived in an ice castle?" He shrugged, walking toward the window. "Something like that. But this feels like someone who used to believe in warmth and just forgot how to enjoy it." Caroline let out a breath, half laugh, half resistance. "You're very good at poetic insults. I'm just observant." She poured 2 glasses of Cabernet, handed one to him, then sat across the room, legs crossed, posture straight. "Why are you really here, Ben?" He sat slowly, swirling the wine in his glass. "Because I can't stop thinking about that moment in the garden, about how you looked at me like you wanted to run and stay at the same time." She didn't answer, not right away. Instead, she studied him, the creases at the corners of his eyes, the way he held the wine but hadn't sipped it yet, the slight scuff on his boots, like he walked more than people expected. "I didn't invite you here to talk about eye contact," she said. He finally took a sip. "Then tell me why I'm here." Caroline leaned back, the silence between them pulsing like a heartbeat. "Because I don't know what this is," she admitted, "and I'm trying to decide if it's worth letting my guard down for something that might disappear the second it's inconvenient." Ben set his glass on the table, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What if I said the same thing?" She looked at him, surprised. "I'm not just some folk singer who got lucky with a song and stumbled into your world. I've built things. Lost things. I know what it means to guard a heart that doesn't trust easily." Caroline's voice lowered. "And yet you write songs about falling. Because I know what it looks like when someone doesn't." The words landed like soft punches. She stood, restless now, moving to the window. Below, the lights of Charleston flickered like a postcard, picturesque, distant. "I was married once," she said, almost to the glass. "He said he loved how independent I was, until he didn't, until it became a threat." Ben didn't move. Then came the next one, a man who adored the idea of me. The public version. The headlines, the elegance, the power. But not the private parts, not the nights I didn't want to talk. Or the days I doubted everything I'd built. Still, he didn't speak. I stopped letting people in after that. It was easier. Cleaner. A pause. And lonelier? She turned slowly. He was still sitting, hands calm in his lap, expression unreadable. "Yes," she said, "but predictable." Ben stood now, walked over, keeping a respectful distance. "I don't need to be the exception to your rules, Caroline. But I'd like the chance to be something that doesn't hurt you." Her breath caught. "You think that's possible?" "I think we don't know. And I think that's a better starting place than pretending we do." She didn't reply. Not until the room had gone so quiet the hum of the refrigerator felt intrusive. Then, with a sigh that carried years, she whispered, "You make it very hard to stay logical." "Good," he said. "Logic rarely writes the best endings." They stood there, neither moving, the moment as fragile as it was inevitable. Then the doorbell rang. Caroline's entire posture changed, straightened. Armored, her hand moved to her hip, lips pressing into a line. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she murmured. Ben stepped back instinctively. She crossed the room and opened the door. And there, holding a paper bag and wearing a sheepish smile, stood Wyatt Green. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything," he said. Caroline blinked. "Wyatt? I brought pastries." "Your favorites. From that place on Meeting Street. You used to eat them by the dozen when you were writing up investment reports." She stood frozen for a beat. "Why? Now?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Because I read my own article this morning and realized I'd written more about your past than your present. And I thought maybe I should fix that." "In person." Caroline didn't respond, just stepped aside. Wyatt entered, eyes adjusting to the soft light. Then he saw Ben. "Oh," he said, polite but surprised. "Hi." Ben nodded. "Wyatt, Caroline's mentioned you." Wyatt's eyes flicked to Caroline. "I'd imagine." An awkward silence stretched between them, thick as humidity. Caroline exhaled. "Well, this is cozy." Wyatt handed her the bag. Raspberry almond, still warm. Ben glanced toward the door. "I should go." Caroline looked at him, alarm flickering in her chest. "You don't have to." He offered a kind smile. "It's fine. I'm not in the habit of standing between old friends and warm pastries." Wyatt didn't gloat. Just waited. Caroline touched Ben's arm lightly. "Thank you. For tonight." His eyes met hers, steady. "It's not the last one, unless you want it to be." She didn't answer. Didn't know how to. Ben gave a small nod to Wyatt and left as quietly as he had entered. The door clicked shut. Caroline turned, still holding the bag, heart thudding far too loud. Wyatt sat casually on the sofa, looking around. "Place looks the same." She didn't move. He glanced up. "So, that song he sang, it was about you, wasn't it?" Caroline didn't answer. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, set the bag on the counter, and stared at it like it might explode. And for the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't quite name. Not guilt. Not regret. Not even confusion. Just a weight shifting. And the very real sense that her carefully curated world was tilting, slowly, irrevocably, toward something new. The morning after Wyatt's unexpected visit began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hummed with too many thoughts, too many what-ifs, looping through Caroline's mind like a stubborn melody she couldn't turn off. She sat at the small breakfast nook by her window, staring at a half-eaten croissant and an untouched second cup of coffee. The sky over Charleston was a hazy blend of gold and lavender, and somewhere in the distance a saxophone played from a balcony radio, soft, mournful, and oddly appropriate. Maeve arrived at 8 sharp, tablet under her arm, her usual purposeful stride slowing when she saw Caroline. "You didn't sleep," Maeve said, reading her in a single glance. Caroline didn't look up. "I had company." Unexpected. Wyatt? A small nod. And Ben? Left before the pastries cooled. Maeve took the seat across from her, placing the tablet down gently instead of her usual brisk drop. "That's a complicated table setting." Caroline finally looked up, tired eyes narrowing. "Is that your professional diagnosis?" Maeve smirked. "That's my friend diagnosis." Caroline pressed her fingers to her temples. "I don't know what I'm doing, Maeve. I don't know how this became a triangle when I didn't even ask for a line." Maeve waited a moment. Then, "Maybe because you finally stopped scripting your life and real stories." "They're messy." Caroline sat back in her chair, watching the light shift across the wood floors. Wyatt came with memories. Ben came with possibilities. "Neither asked what I wanted." Maeve tilted her head. "Did you ask what you wanted?" Caroline opened her mouth, then closed it. Maeve leaned in. "You're always in control, Caroline. Always. But maybe it's okay to not know. To let something, someone, happen without a business plan." Caroline let the words sink in. Then slowly stood, walked to the window, and watched the traffic below. "Ben's performing tonight," she said after a beat. "Small charity event. No press, just locals." Maeve nodded. "Are you going?" "I don't know yet." Maeve stood, smoothing her blazer. "Then don't decide yet. Just show up. To your own life." The venue was tucked behind an old bookstore on Queen Street. No red carpet. No velvet ropes. Just mismatched chairs, twinkle lights, and the sound of tuning strings from behind a makeshift curtain. It smelled like cedar and old pages. Caroline lingered outside the door for almost 5 full minutes, arms folded, watching as couples wandered in with wine bottles and cozy scarves. This wasn't her world, not the polished, curated realm she'd built. This was loose edges, rough wood, and bare honesty. She walked in anyway. No one gasped. No one even looked twice. That, in itself, was disorienting. Ben was already on stage, adjusting his mic. He spotted her instantly, but his reaction wasn't a performance, just a flicker of warmth in his eyes. And then he looked away, letting her arrive in peace. She found a seat in the back, next to a couple sipping cider out of mason jars. The woman smiled at her. Caroline smiled back faintly. Ben stepped up, strumming a quiet chord. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Tonight's about local stories, old songs, and maybe, if we're lucky, a little clarity." He played the first song with his eyes closed. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about anyone, really. It was about losing time, missing voices, and learning to walk beside silence without trying to fill it. It was devastating. And beautiful. After the third song, the room took a short break. Caroline rose, slowly making her way outside, needing air more than applause. Ben found her 5 minutes later under the awning, mist collecting in her hair. "You came," he said, stepping into the low light beside her. "I didn't decide until I was already here." "That's a good start." She glanced at him. "You didn't write those songs for me." "No," he said, "but I sang them near you." Caroline looked back toward the door. "You have a gift, Ben. That intimacy. That honesty." He shrugged. "I've had to learn how to tell the truth when everything else feels like fog." She hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever been in love?" He didn't smile. Didn't rush. "Yes," he said, "twice. Once when I was too young to know what I had, and once when I knew, but wasn't strong enough to hold it." Caroline exhaled. "I'm not used to men admitting weakness." "Then they've been performing too." He stepped closer, not crowding her, but close enough that she could feel his calm settle between them. "What about you?" he asked. She paused. "I've had partnerships. Deals dressed as relationships. And once, something close. But it ended before it ever became real." "Why?" "Because I thought protecting myself meant never being surprised. But it also meant never being seen." Ben nodded, as if he'd already known the answer. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper, creased and handwritten. "I found this song years ago," he said, half finished. "Could never complete it." She took it gently, scanning the first line. "Somewhere I built a house without windows, just to keep the light from catching me off guard." Caroline looked up. "It's beautiful." He smiled. "It didn't make sense until I met someone who builds houses for a living." The emotional air thickened. She folded the paper, her voice thinner than she liked. "You have a habit of breaking down walls without asking permission. And you have a habit of building them before I get too close." They stood there for a long moment, neither speaking, both knowing the weight of what hadn't been said yet. Then Caroline stepped back. Just slightly. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "I didn't ask you to be. I don't know what I want." "You don't have to." He took the paper from her hand and tucked it back into his pocket. "But when you do," he said softly, "I'll still be here, not waiting, just living. With room for you, if you ever want it." Caroline watched him return inside, guitar already in hand, the crowd cheering before he even played another note. She stayed under the mist, one hand on the edge of the awning, the other pressed to her chest. Not to guard it. Just to feel it, still beating, still softening. Still trying to decide what kind of story it wanted to be part of next. It had been 4 days since Caroline stood beneath that awning, her fingers brushing her chest, as if to remind her heart it still belonged to her. Since then, silence. No calls from Ben, no messages, No quiet jokes folded into song lyrics or unexpected envelopes with unfinished poetry. It unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The city moved on. Meetings, ribbon cuttings, a breakfast roundtable on urban development. Her calendar remained packed, her outfits pristine, but something had shifted. She noticed the quiet moments now, the ones that used to blur by unnoticed. A morning breeze through an open window, the echo of her heels on the marble floor. The pause before answering a question. It was in one of those pauses that Maeve knocked on her office door and stepped in without waiting. "You have a visitor," she said, her tone softer than usual. "I don't take drop-ins." Maeve didn't move. "She said she's family." Caroline blinked. "Who?" Maeve gestured behind her. Caroline stood slowly, rounding the desk, and froze. Chloe. Her daughter stood in the doorway, arms folded, expression carefully unreadable. "Hi, Mom." The last time they'd spoken face-to-face was nearly 6 months ago. A tense weekend in Atlanta that ended with a polite but hollow hug and months of missed calls. Caroline's voice cracked slightly. "What are you doing here?" Chloe stepped in, heels clicking, sharp in a navy suit and hair pulled back with her usual precision. "I read about your public appearances lately. Thought I'd check in before the gossip columns became my only way of keeping up with you." Caroline winced. "I didn't ask to be in the spotlight. You also didn't ask me to visit." They stood in that polished office, two women who shared everything except how to speak gently with each other. "I suppose I should say thank you," Caroline offered, gesturing toward the seating area. Chloe sat. Caroline followed. "You look good," Caroline added, reaching for some small bridge between them. Chloe offered a tight smile. "You look different." Caroline tilted her head. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation. You seem distracted, not in a bad way. Just softer." Caroline felt her throat tighten. "I didn't realize that would be worth noting." Chloe looked down, fingers twisting the strap of her purse. "I'm not here to fight, Mom. I'm here because I saw your name tied to someone who seemed to bring out something in you I haven't seen in years." Caroline froze. Chloe looked up. "Ben Callahan." "I watched the video. I heard the song." Silence stretched. "I'm not asking for the details," Chloe said. "I just want to know if you're okay." Caroline stared at her daughter, grown, guarded, and yet somehow reaching in a way she hadn't in so long. And it made something inside her ache. "I'm trying," Caroline said quietly. "To do what?" "To let someone matter, without knowing how it ends." Chloe exhaled. "That's not something I expected to hear you say. It's not something I expected to say." They sat in stillness for a moment, the hum of city traffic rising faintly from the windows. Then Chloe reached into her bag and pulled out a small manila envelope. "I brought something," she said, "from Dad's place. I was sorting through some of the old stuff and I found this. Figured it was yours." Caroline opened it slowly. Inside, a faded photo. Her, Chloe, and Chloe's father on the steps of a house long since sold. She remembered the day, the light, the way the wind caught Chloe's curls, the way she was already pretending to smile instead of actually doing it. She traced the edge of the photo. "I thought this was gone." "Some things come back," Chloe said. "Even when we think we've let them go." Caroline looked up, her eyes glassy. Chloe stood. "I'm staying for a few days. I'll be at the Belmont if you want to talk more." "I'm around." Caroline nodded. "Thank you for coming." As Chloe walked out, Caroline sat back in her chair, the photo still in her hand. She stared at it for a long time. That evening, she walked through the French Quarter without purpose, her heels echoing off cobblestone, the soft click a rhythm she'd known since her 20s. She passed antique shops and art galleries, glowing softly in the dusk. It was the kind of night made for reflection and regret. Her feet carried her without intention to the side door of a music bar tucked between a bakery and a cigar shop. The sign read, "Closed for private event." Inside, through the window, she spotted Ben, tuning his guitar, seated on a wooden stool alone in the glow of a single spotlight. He looked different tonight. Focused. Calm. A man who wasn't waiting, but who hadn't forgotten. She didn't knock, didn't walk in. She just stood there for a moment, watching him through glass. Like a window into a life she might step into or walk away from. And then he looked up, saw her. Their eyes met, and this time she didn't look away. Ben stood slowly, walked toward the door, opened it. Neither spoke. Then Caroline said softly, "You didn't call. I didn't know if I should. I wasn't ready. I wasn't asking." A beat passed. Caroline stepped inside. The warmth of the room settled over her shoulders like a memory she hadn't touched in years. Ben sat back down, his guitar resting on his knee. He looked up at her. "Stay a minute?" She didn't nod. She didn't need to. She just walked toward him, heels quiet on the wood floor. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to be anything but present. The next morning unfolded slowly, like a curtain drawn back after a long performance. Caroline stood at her kitchen counter, pouring hot water over fresh coffee grounds, the aroma grounding her more than any meeting or contract ever could. She hadn't slept well, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't from overthinking. It was the quiet hum of something unknown settling inside her, a sense that something important had begun, even if she couldn't name it yet. Ben had played for her after she walked in last night. Just one song. Unfinished, raw, a melody without a chorus. But it had filled the room like truth. No performance, no audience. Just her, him, and the sound of something fragile becoming real. She turned as Maeve walked in, letting herself through the side door with her usual precise rhythm. "Morning," Maeve said, glancing at her watch. "You're supposed to be on a call with the Riverfront Trust in 15. Caroline sipped her coffee. "Reschedule it." Maeve paused mid-scroll. "Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine." "That's usually code for something happened, but I'm not ready to talk about it." Caroline leaned against the counter, fingers curling around the warm mug. "Ben played for me. Just me. No press. No cameras. And somehow, it felt louder than anything I've heard in years." Maeve gave a rare, soft smile. "You let him in. I didn't mean to. But he keeps showing up in the quiet moments." Maeve studied her for a beat. "You always say timing is everything. And I've always been terrible at it." Maeve set the tablet down. "Chloe called this morning." Caroline tensed. "About what?" "She said she wants to have dinner. Just the two of you." Caroline's lips parted in surprise. "Did she say why?" "She said it's time." Time. A word that had become both a gift and a threat in Caroline's life. She nodded. "Set it up." That evening, she arrived early at the bistro Chloe had chosen. Intimate, tucked beneath a canopy of crepe myrtles, candles flickering inside like soft stars. Caroline chose a table in the corner, near the window, far from the noise. Chloe arrived 5 minutes later, right on schedule. She wore flats, no jacket, hair looser than usual. Not casual, but closer to it. "Hi," Chloe said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hi," Caroline replied, folding her napkin slowly. The server arrived. They ordered. Silence stretched between them like a tablecloth neither wanted to wrinkle. Finally, Chloe broke it. "I've been thinking about something you said," she began, "that you're trying to let someone matter without knowing how it ends." Caroline looked up, eyes steady. "It's harder than it sounds." "I know." Chloe took a slow breath, then continued. "When I was younger, I used to think you were invincible, that nothing touched you, and if it did, you buried it so deep I couldn't find it." Caroline's throat tightened. "That wasn't strength, Chloe. That was survival. I know that now. But back then, it felt like a wall between us." Caroline's voice softened. "I built a lot of those." Chloe nodded. "And now you're starting to tear them down." "I'm trying. Is Ben helping?" Caroline didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window, watching a couple walk past, laughing, their hands intertwined, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yes," she said at last. "He doesn't ask for anything. He just sees me." "That sounds terrifying." Caroline smiled faintly. "It is." They paused as the server delivered their meals. After he left, Chloe leaned forward. "I want to understand more, Mom, about you. About how you got here, not just the press version." Caroline reached for her wine. "That story's messy. So is mine." For the first time in years, they talked. Not just about logistics or holidays or work, but about memories, pain, misunderstandings that had calcified into distance. Caroline confessed things she'd never said aloud, that she'd been afraid of needing anyone, especially her own daughter, because needing meant risking disappointment. Chloe's eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. "I never needed perfect. I just needed honest." "I didn't know how to be," Caroline whispered. "You're learning." After dinner, they stood outside beneath the soft glow of the hanging lights. Chloe hugged her, tight, real, and without pretense. "I'm proud of you," she said. Caroline held her close. "I'm proud of you, too." They parted with promises to meet again soon. No pressure, just intention. Later that night, Caroline found herself walking again, without a clear destination. The city was quiet, humid, soft with summer air. Her feet led her to Ben's place before her mind fully caught up. A small house with a porch that creaked, tucked behind a row of oaks. Music floated faintly through the windows. Piano this time, not guitar. She stood at the gate, heart racing. He stepped out before she could knock, holding a cup of tea, barefoot, as if he'd been waiting without realizing it. "I was just thinking about you," he said, setting the cup down on the railing. "I talked to Chloe tonight," Caroline said. "We cleared a few things up." He smiled. "That's good. I told her you helped." Ben walked down the steps, stopping just in front of her. "I'm not trying to fix anything for you, Caroline. I just want to be here while you do." She nodded, her voice quiet. "Would you walk with me?" "Anywhere." They strolled through the neighborhood, past dim porches and quiet windows, the night folding around them like a soft blanket. Caroline spoke first. "You asked if I'd ever been in love." Ben looked over at her but didn't interrupt. "I think I might be learning how now." He stopped, turned to her. "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it for you," she said. "I'm saying it for me." Ben stepped closer. "Then let me say something too. Caroline waited. I don't want to rush this, or define it, or paint it into a perfect frame. But I want to keep showing up. Every day. With you. She looked up, eyes glossy. Even when I push you away? I'll be where you left me. Just a few steps back. Not gone. Caroline reached for his hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. They walked on, fingers intertwined, not needing to know the ending, only that they'd both finally stepped into the middle of something worth writing. The following week moved like honey through warm fingers, slow, golden, deceptively sweet. Caroline felt the difference in everything, in how her shoulders lowered when she walked into a room, in how she answered emails with fewer clipped lines and more space between her sentences, in the way she laughed, real, unguarded, at least once a day. But it didn't take long for the city to notice. On Friday morning, she sat across from Wyatt Green at a small cafe off East Bay. He'd requested the meeting with a vague message. We need to talk. It's not a column, just me. He arrived on time, dressed down in a linen button-up and worn loafers, carrying a notebook he didn't open. You look content, he said as he settled into the chair. That sounds dangerously close to surprised. He smiled. Just different. There's something in your eyes I haven't seen in a while. Caroline sipped her coffee. I suppose spending time with a man who doesn't care about my portfolio has its perks. Wyatt leaned back. So it's real then? You and Ben? She met his gaze, holding it steady. It's not press, Wyatt. It doesn't need defining in print. I'm not writing anything, I swear. Then why are we here? He hesitated, drumming his fingers once against the ceramic mug. Because people are talking. Miriam, in particular. Caroline's stomach cooled. Of course she is. She's convinced this whole thing with Ben is a distraction. That you're pulling focus from your foundation's latest land bid in the historic district. That's absurd. The proposal's been public for months. She's pitching an op-ed to the Gazette. Preservation over personality. You can imagine the tone. Caroline narrowed her eyes. She's threatened. She's calculating. And she's getting the board stirred up. She's been waiting years to pounce. Wyatt leaned in. She's not the only one. People are looking for cracks. And whether you like it or not, your happiness makes you more visible. Vulnerability is irresistible to critics. Caroline looked down at her cup, voice quieter. I used to be invisible. Now I'm exposed. For what? Falling in love? Wyatt didn't flinch. You know Charleston. Appearances whisper louder than facts. Caroline sat back, spine straightening. Let them whisper. I'm not hiding. He nodded, slowly. Just be ready. Miriam plays the long game. That afternoon, Caroline met Ben at the old Maritime Museum by the water. He had suggested it the night before, said there was a space he wanted her to see. When she arrived, he was already inside, seated at a piano near the bay window. You play? She asked as she walked in. Badly, he replied. But the keys don't judge, so we get along. The room was quiet, filled with the scent of aged wood and salt air. Sunlight filtered through the windows, landing on his hands. He closed the piano gently. I heard about Miriam. Caroline's brow lifted. News travels fast. Elena mentioned something. She used to handle PR for her before switching to my team. Caroline crossed her arms. Of course. She's stirring the pot, Ben said, claiming you're using our relationship to distract from zoning controversies. Caroline laughed once, bitterly. It's always amusing how men are allowed to fall in love without scrutiny. But when women do, it's labeled as strategy. Ben stood, walking over to her. So, what do you want to do? Nothing. If I dignify it, I legitimize it. He studied her. That sounds smart, but is it honest? She stiffened. Excuse me? He softened. I just mean, I know how much you've worked to build what you have, and I know how hard it is to let someone in without feeling like you're risking all of it. She turned away, eyes glassing slightly. You think I should stand on a podium and declare us real? I think you should stop acting like this is something you have to apologize for. The words sank into her slowly. She crossed the room, looking out at the boats drifting beyond the window. Her voice dropped. I've always led with strength. It's the only language Charleston respects. Now I'm learning a new one, and it terrifies them. And you? She turned back to him, quieter now. It terrifies me too. Ben walked to her, stopping just close enough for her to feel the heat of him. Then let's terrify them together. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. You really want to be part of this storm? I've weathered worse. And besides, he said with a half-smile, you're the first storm I've wanted to walk into. She laughed then. Soft, shaky, but real. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Maeve. She answered, holding it to her ear, eyes still on Ben. Maeve's voice came fast. It's live. The op-ed. Miriam got it published. It's already trending. Caroline's stomach twisted. What's it say? Maeve hesitated. She calls you a figurehead propped up by media fantasy. Says your emotional entanglements are distracting you from your commitments to the city. She implies Ben's using you to stage a comeback. Caroline's voice hardened. Send me the link. I'll get ahead of it, Maeve said quickly. I'll draft a statement. No, Caroline replied, voice flat. Let it breathe. What? I said, let it breathe. Maeve paused. Caroline, I'm not fighting a shadow. I'll speak when it counts. She ended the call. Ben watched her carefully. You okay? No, she admitted, but I will be. Then slowly, with calm precision, she reached for his hand. Let's give them something real to talk about. His smile widened. Finally. They left the museum together, hand in hand, into the salt-kissed light of late afternoon, knowing full well that the wind was about to change. But this time they were ready to walk straight into it. Caroline stared at the blank page in front of her, the cursor blinking like it was daring her to speak. The statement Maeve had suggested still sat in her inbox, unedited, untouched. It was clever, poised, sterile. Everything Charleston expected of her. But it wasn't what she needed to say. She closed the laptop. Outside her office window, the afternoon stretched long and golden, but she didn't feel the light. She felt exposed, not from what Miriam had written, that she could handle. She'd lived through worse storms dressed in silk and silence. What unsettled her now was the intimacy of truth brushing against her life, the truth that she cared, about Ben, about how she was seen, about whether this thing between them was strong enough to hold under pressure. Her phone buzzed. A text. Ben, meet me at 6, no questions. Dress for comfort. She didn't reply, but she went. By 5:30 she was driving across the bridge, wind curling through the open window. She wore flats, jeans, and a linen shirt, things she hadn't worn in public since before her name meant anything. It felt strange. Free. Like remembering a version of herself she used to love, before ambition crowded it out. The address led her to an old greenhouse on the edge of Mount Pleasant, wrapped in ivy and glowing from within like a lantern on a foggy road. She stepped out, heels clicking softly against the gravel, the scent of jasmine greeting her like a memory. Ben was already inside, arranging something on a long wooden table. Glass bottles, a pitcher of lemonade, a stack of records leaning casually against a weathered chair. He looked up when she walked in and smiled in that quiet, wholehearted way that made everything else still. "Welcome to neutral ground," he said. Caroline tilted her head. "This is yours?" "A friend's. He lets me borrow it when I need to breathe." She walked slowly toward the table, the old floor creaking beneath her. "Why here?" "Because I thought maybe you'd need a space that doesn't care who you are." She exhaled through a laugh. "You really think spaces care?" "I think some do," he said gently. "Like ballrooms and boardrooms. They demand things, but this place just holds you." Caroline didn't answer right away. She reached for one of the records, brushing dust from the sleeve. "My father had this one. He used to play it on Sunday mornings while making pancakes. Burned every single one." Ben chuckled. "Sounds like a solid memory." "It is. I just forgot it existed." He poured her a glass of lemonade, handed it to her, then nodded toward a pair of old wicker chairs in the back corner, surrounded by overgrown ferns and light filtered through vines. They sat, the greenhouse humming softly with the chirp of crickets and the buzz of faraway cicadas. "I've been thinking," Caroline said after a long pause, "about what it means to be seen. Really seen. I used to think visibility was a weakness. It can be, if the person looking doesn't care. But you do." Ben nodded once. "I do." She looked at him, eyes heavy with something she hadn't named yet. "That op-ed hurt more than I admitted." "I know. It wasn't because of the lies. It was because for a moment I wondered if she was right." Ben's voice was steady. "She's not. What if I lose the board? The projects? The trust I've spent decades building?" Ben leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "What if you don't? What if you gain something deeper than control?" Caroline swallowed. "You make it sound easy." "It's not, but it's worth it." Silence settled again. The soft kind, the kind that doesn't rush to be filled. Then Ben stood and walked to the far corner of the greenhouse, picking up his guitar. He strummed once, adjusted a string, then sat back down. "Can I play something for you?" She nodded, slowly. He started quietly, the chords simple, the melody soft. "I've seen you behind the headlines, in rooms that echo your name. But tonight, I just want the version that isn't playing a game. No cameras, no verdicts, no polished silver speech. Just the woman who keeps her heart where most can't even reach." Caroline blinked. Once. Twice. Her breath caught somewhere in her throat. Ben's voice lowered with the next verse. "So tell me the story you don't sell. Show me the grief you never name. Let me love the corners you hide, not just the parts wrapped in fame." He stopped playing, and the stillness that followed was louder than applause. She looked at him, her voice trembling just enough to make it human. "How do you write like that?" "Because I've been listening," he said. She stood then, slowly, and walked to him. "I don't know what this is yet," she said, "but I know it's the first thing in a long time that doesn't feel like a transaction." Ben set the guitar aside, stood to meet her. "It's not. It's a beginning." She nodded, then looked away, overwhelmed by how easily he could see through everything. "I'm scared," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Good. That means you're feeling." She turned back, eyes glassy. "Can we just stay here?" she asked. "For a while?" For as long as you need, he said. No statements. No speeches. Just us. And in that overgrown glass house, sheltered from the noise, the opinions, the polished chaos of her public life, Caroline finally allowed herself to exhale. And it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. Rain fell in slow, steady streaks down the arched windows of the art gallery, smudging the view of Charleston's historic rooftops like a watercolor left in the sun. The benefit was already underway. Small talk buzzed gently beneath soft jazz, drifting from a quartet tucked in the far corner. Glasses clinked, smiles shimmered. Everything looked perfect. Caroline stood near the center display, a sculpture of intertwined glass and iron, heavy and elegant. She stared at it, not seeing it. Her reflection blinked faintly in the polished floor beneath her, fragmented by gallery lights. She hadn't seen Ben in 3 days, not since the greenhouse, not since she let herself fall into something that felt terrifyingly close to real. Since then, silence. Not cold, not angry. Just distance. Maeve approached quietly, tablet in one hand, a glass of seltzer in the other. You've been here an hour and haven't spoken to anyone. Caroline didn't move. What would I say? That I'm thinking of skipping out on my own board meeting next week? That I've been replaying a single moment in my head like it's trying to teach me something I don't want to learn? Maeve paused. Is this about Ben? No, Caroline said, too quickly. Yes, maybe. Maeve handed her the seltzer, voice gentler than usual. Then say that. Caroline finally looked at her. I'm not built for this. For what? Waiting, hoping. Trusting that someone won't run the moment I stop performing. Maeve held her gaze. He didn't run. Maybe he's giving you space to decide whether you'll chase him. A beat passed. Then Maeve walked away. Caroline stood still, eyes falling back to the sculpture, all twisted edges and vulnerable beauty. Then a whisper behind her. Nice choice of armor. She turned sharply. Ben stood a few feet away. Rain clung to his jacket. His hair was damp, his expression unreadable. But his eyes were full of something she couldn't ignore. She blinked. What are you doing here? I got your name on a program next to a list of donors, he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. Figured that was an invitation. You could have called. You could have answered. Caroline felt the flush rise in her chest, sharp and sudden. I didn't know what to say. Ben stepped closer. You didn't have to say anything. Just show up. You're always asking for honesty. And when I gave it to you, you disappeared. I needed time. I gave it. She looked down. And what if I'm still figuring it out? Then I'll stand right here until you do. Silence. Heavy. Real. I've been waiting my whole life for someone to see the version of me I don't parade out at events like this, she said, voice shaking. And now that you've seen it, I'm afraid you won't like what's underneath. Ben's voice lowered. Caroline, I don't want the version you dress up. I want the woman who says too little when she means too much. The one who hides in logic when her heart's on fire. Her breath caught. And I know you're scared, he added. But so am I. Every step I take toward you feels like stepping into something that could undo me. But I'd rather be undone with you than polished without you. Caroline's hand trembled slightly around the glass. You have no idea what you're getting into. Ben smiled, just enough to soften her defenses. I think I do. You're not a mystery, Caroline. You're a map. You just haven't let anyone read it. She closed her eyes, then opened them slowly. I'm not good at this. I'm not asking for perfection, he said. I'm asking for presents. She stared at him, that sentence settling in her chest, like it belonged there. The quartet shifted into a slow tune. A few couples swayed near the edges of the gallery. Ben offered a hand. "Dance with me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Here? Why not?" She hesitated. Then she placed her hand in his. They moved slowly, gently, surrounded by strangers and sculptures, and a silence that for once didn't need filling. And in that small orbit, beneath soft lights and rain-glazed windows, Caroline let herself believe, for the first time, that this might not be a detour. It might just be the road. Caroline stood barefoot on the cool tile of her kitchen, early sunlight spilling through the wide windows. The morning was still, the house wrapped in that hush only Sunday mornings seemed to know. A record played softly in the background, Billie Holiday, her voice brushing against the edges of silence like a confession too tender to say aloud. Ben was sitting at the breakfast table, sleeves rolled, reading over the Charleston Post, with half a smile on his lips. The same paper that had once hinted she was a spectacle now ran a headline in the lower corner. Caroline Monroe supports New Heritage Grant for local artists. A picture accompanied it. Her and Ben side by side at the gallery event. Eyes soft. The caption neutral. Neutral was good. Neutral meant they hadn't ruined it yet. She set a mug of coffee beside him. He looked up, his eyes warm. "Thanks." Caroline leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You stayed." "I told you I would." Her heart gave a quiet tug, too tender to trust fully, yet too honest to ignore. "Last night, I didn't expect it to feel so easy," she said. Ben's gaze lingered. "It wasn't easy. It was earned." She smiled just a little. "You're good at saying things that stick." He chuckled, turning the page. "It's a musician thing. Lyrics, timing, pretending I'm braver than I am." "Are you pretending now?" He looked up again, slower this time. "No." That single word sat between them like a truth they'd both tiptoed around. Then Caroline moved to sit across from him. "Maeve says people are calming down. The Miriam thing fizzled. Mostly because I didn't fan the flame." She was trying to rattle you. She almost did. Ben nodded. But she didn't. A beat passed. The music shifted. Something quieter now. "I've been thinking about the house on Ashley Avenue," Caroline said. "The one I started restoring a year ago. It's been sitting untouched for months." Ben sipped his coffee. "The one with the wraparound porch and the green shutters? You remember that?" "I remember everything you say when you're not trying to impress anyone." She felt her cheeks warm. "Well, I was thinking of turning it into a creative space. Studio, maybe a writer's room upstairs, something for the community." Ben tilted his head. "You sure?" "No," she said honestly. "But it's the first idea I've had in a while that didn't feel performative. It feels rooted. That's how you know it's real." He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. "You keep surprising me," she whispered. "I hope I never stop." They sat there for a moment, the morning wrapping around them gently. No stage, no audience. Just a woman who had stopped running, and a man who knew how to wait. Later that day, they walked through the house on Ashley Avenue together. Dust still clung to the windows, and the air held the musty scent of forgotten stories. But light poured in through every room. Wide, clean light that didn't care what came before. Ben stood in the middle of the foyer, arms crossed. "It's got soul. It's got holes in the ceiling." He grinned. "Both can be fixed." They wandered from room to room, talking about possibilities. An open reading space, gallery walls for local artists, maybe even a corner stage for intimate performances. Every idea felt bigger than them, but not out of reach. Caroline paused in the upstairs hallway, fingers tracing the edge of a doorframe. I used to think I needed to be surrounded by polished marble and glass to prove I belonged, she said quietly. But now, this wood, these imperfections, they feel more like me than anything I've owned. Ben came up beside her, resting a hand on the frame just above hers. That's what happens when you start choosing your life instead of curating it. She looked at him, something shifting in her chest. What are we doing, Ben? He didn't answer immediately. Then gently, we're building something. Doesn't have to be defined yet, it just has to be honest. She nodded, eyes burning just a little. They walked outside, into the soft gold of late afternoon. The street was quiet, magnolia trees swaying gently above them. Caroline looked back at the house, chipped, unpolished, full of potential, much like the life she was beginning to allow herself to want. Ben took her hand, and together, they stepped off the porch. Not because they'd figured it all out, but because they'd finally stopped pretending they had to. The email came just after sunrise, the kind that didn't start with a greeting, just a link, a headline, and a warning. New allegations surface over Monroe historic property deal. Caroline stared at the screen, the city still quiet beyond her windows, the morning light not yet strong enough to feel like comfort. Her coffee had gone cold. Her heart hadn't even started beating faster. Not yet. She just read it again. Beneath the headline were familiar words, accusations of using her influence to fast-track development. Claims that the Ashley Avenue house was a front for private gain under the guise of community investment. A quote from someone she didn't even remember meeting. A photo of her at the benefit with Ben. A headline within the headline, is Monroe's romance masking a real estate power play? She closed the laptop slowly. The knock at the door was soft, but not hesitant. Maeve stepped inside, eyes already narrowed. I saw it. Caroline didn't move. They're calling it corruption. Again, Maeve crossed her arms. It's recycled gossip. No real evidence. But the timing is sharp. 2 days before the board vote. And the photo? A cheap play. Public affection as weaponized optics. Caroline looked out the window. I thought we were past this. Maeve's voice gentled. Charleston never forgets. It just waits. A long silence passed between them. Then Maeve said, Ben's gonna see this. I know. And it's going to affect him too. Caroline didn't respond, just rubbed the inside of her wrist slowly, a small unconscious movement she'd developed during years of media storms. What do you want to do? Maeve asked. I want to speak, Caroline said, quiet but clear. But not in a press release. Maeve raised an eyebrow. Then how? By early evening, Caroline stood behind the podium at a community center in North Charleston, the very space she had helped fund, the same one where she first announced the Heritage Grant now under fire. Chairs filled the room, local residents, members of her foundation. A few reporters, hungry but quiet, and Ben standing near the back. She met his eyes. He didn't smile. She exhaled slowly, stepped up, and began. When I first walked into the Ashley Avenue house, I wasn't thinking of public projects or politics. I wasn't thinking of headlines. I was thinking of restoration, of something left behind being brought back to life. That house has holes in the ceiling, cracked windows, years of neglect, and still, it has soul. Because it stood through storms. It's proof that something doesn't have to be untouched to be worth saving. She paused, voice steady. I've spent my life protecting things. My name, my business, my image. I thought if I kept everything perfectly polished, I couldn't be questioned. But something changed recently. Someone changed it. A murmur ran through the crowd. I've begun building something real, not curated. Not calculated, just honest. And yes, that includes the man standing at the back of this room. Ben didn't move. His face remained unreadable. She continued, I will not apologize for letting someone matter to me. And I will not allow truth to be twisted into scandal just because I dared to be both successful and in love. The words landed like steady rain. She stepped back. Applause rose, not thunderous, but certain. Earned. Afterward, people lingered, shook her hand, touched her shoulder, and still she kept glancing toward the back. But Ben was gone. The doorbell rang just after 9. Her house was dark except for the hallway lamp. She opened the door, expecting Maeve. It was Ben. He held nothing, said nothing at first. She didn't speak either. Then he said, That was brave. I didn't know if you'd come. I wasn't sure if I should. She stepped aside. I meant every word. I know. They stood in the hallway, quiet, the air full of something fragile. I was scared you'd see it and think I used you, she said softly. That all of this was optics. I did see it, Ben said, and for a minute I wondered. She closed her eyes. But then I remembered how it felt, standing in that old house, your hand in mine. No cameras, no story. Just breath, just hope. She looked at him. You never promised me perfect, he said. You promised me real. And today, you kept it. Caroline stepped toward him. Do you still want to be part of it? This mess, this renovation? Ben's voice barely broke above a whisper. If you let me. She reached for his hand, held it, and didn't let go. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air when Caroline stepped into the Ashley Avenue house just after sunrise. Sunlight filtered through the open shutters, catching on dust motes and warming the new hardwood floors. The gallery wall was almost complete, just a few empty frames waiting for local artists to fill. She ran her fingers along one of the window sills, newly sanded, smooth, solid. Outside, the garden was beginning to take shape. Wild but intentional, like everything else in her life now. Ben's voice echoed from the back room, humming low and unfinished. She followed it, barefoot, the house still quiet in its in-between state. He was tuning his guitar, sitting in the corner of what would soon be the music space. No microphones. No soundboard, just wood, breath, and strings. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting in that way she still hadn't gotten used to, like she was something found, not pursued. You're early, he said. I couldn't sleep. Because of today? Caroline nodded, moving to sit beside him on the floor. The board votes in 3 hours. Ben rested the guitar across his lap. You've done everything right. Let the facts speak. She tilted her head. Since when do facts ever speak louder than whispers in this town? Maybe not louder, but longer. The truth doesn't shout, it lasts, she exhaled. I used to think legacy was about control. Now I wonder if it's about surrender. Ben didn't answer, just gently rested his hand over hers. Outside, a soft knock echoed from the front of the house. Maeve. She stepped in, holding a to-go coffee tray and a manila folder. Her usual armor. But today she looked different, warmer, lighter. Morning, she said, handing Caroline the coffee. Board members are already assembling at City Hall. Caroline took the folder. Is it bad? Maeve shook her head. Not this time. The Heritage Council wrote a letter in your support. So did the Community Arts Alliance. And Wyatt Green published a follow-up this morning. Legacy over noise. Ben gave a quiet laugh. That's poetic. Caroline scanned the folder, then closed it. I'm not going, she said. Maeve blinked. What? I've made my case. I've answered the accusations, but I don't need to stand in front of another panel and ask permission to be who I am. Maeve looked at her, long and hard, then nodded. Okay, Caroline smiled faintly. That's it? No lecture? I've seen what fear looks like in you, Maeve said. This isn't it. Later that afternoon, they gathered at the Ashley Avenue house for the opening preview. No gala, no velvet ropes. Just neighbors, artists, students, donors, skeptics, and believers, all moving through the space like it belonged to them. Because it did. The walls were filled with paintings and poems. Photographs printed on linen, sculptures made from salvaged wood. Every corner told a story, and none of them were about Caroline. And yet, somehow, all of them were. Ben played in the back garden. Nothing formal. Just a few strings and soft lyrics under a blooming crepe myrtle. Caroline stood near the porch steps, a soft breeze tugging at the hem of her dress. Chloe appeared beside her, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. I brought peace offerings, she said. Caroline smiled, accepting the glass. You stayed longer than I expected, Chloe shrugged. You surprised me. That deserves time. They sipped in silence for a moment. Then Chloe asked, So, this is the life now? Porches and protest letters. Caroline laughed. I suppose so. It suits you. Caroline looked out at the people gathered on the lawn. I used to think being respected meant being untouchable. Now I know the only thing worth holding on to is being reachable. Chloe's voice softened. Ben makes you reachable. Caroline nodded. He makes me honest. They watched as he stood to greet a small group of high school students, showing them the corner where open mic nights would be held. His gestures were open, his smile patient. He wasn't performing. He never was. Maeve walked up with her tablet tucked under one arm. It's official. You got the vote. Unanimous. Caroline let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Maeve added, And you didn't even show up. I did, Caroline said, glancing around. Just not in their room. That evening, long after the last guest had left and the candles were burning low, Ben found her on the porch swing, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, feet tucked beneath her. He sat beside her. Quiet house, she smiled. I like it quiet now. He rested his head lightly against hers. So what's next? Caroline didn't answer right away. Then softly, Now, I just live. Ben looked at her. She met his gaze, steady, unwavering. And you? She asked. I just stay. And in the stillness of that porch with the scent of lavender and paint lingering in the night, she knew. Not everything needed a spotlight to be real. Some things, the best things, only needed room to grow. Caroline stood alone in the Ashley Avenue house, just before dusk, barefoot again. The rooms were quiet, but no longer hollow. The scent of beeswax, lavender, and fresh wood polish clung to the air. Wind slipped through the open windows, catching the curtains in slow waves. She walked slowly from room to room. The place looked different now, not just restored, but lived in, loved. A painting by a teenage artist hung near the stairs, bright and a little chaotic. In the corner, someone had left a folded paper program from last week's open mic. It still had a faint coffee ring on it, and the words, "Home is where someone listens." She reached the back door and stepped outside. Ben was there, sitting on the edge of the low brick wall near the garden, tuning his guitar as the sky faded into a soft amber. "You always find the quiet," she said. He smiled. "It follows you lately." Caroline joined him, brushing a stray leaf from her lap as she sat. "I got a call this morning." "Trouble?" "No. Opportunity." She looked over at him. "The Preservation Board wants me to join their advisory committee. Said my work here changed their view on restoration." Ben raised an eyebrow. "That's a turn." "It is." She paused. "But I said no." His fingers stilled on the strings. "Why?" "Because for the first time, I don't want to spend my energy proving I deserve to be in the room. I'd rather build the room. Invite people in. Let them speak." Ben nodded, setting the guitar down beside him. "That sounds like someone who finally stopped performing." She turned to face him. "You taught me that." "No," he said softly. "You taught yourself. I just stayed long enough for you to hear it." She looked away, eyes scanning the garden where rosemary and lemon balm had begun to overtake the edges of the path. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "I used to walk into places and wonder how I'd be remembered when I left. Now, I walk in wondering who I'll meet if I stay." Ben leaned back on his hands, gazing at her like the moment deserved its own spotlight. "That's the kind of woman I'd write a song about." "You already did," he laughed. "I never finished it." She tilted her head. "Why not?" He looked at her, all quiet warmth. "Because I didn't know the last line yet." She stood then, brushing her palms together. "Come with me." He followed her through the house, up the old staircase with its newly repaired railings, to the small room tucked under the eaves. The windows framed the sky like a painting in motion. "This will be the writer's room," she said, gesturing around them. Journals, typewriters, quiet corners, a space for people who don't know how to speak until they're writing. Ben nodded. "It's perfect." She walked over to the narrow desk by the window, opened the drawer, took something out, a folded sheet of notebook paper. His. The song he'd once handed her at the gallery. Only now it had something added at the bottom. In her handwriting. He took it, read it slowly. A final line tucked beneath his unfinished lyric. "And maybe the right place wasn't a door I missed. It was the one I walked into by mistake and chose to stay." Ben swallowed hard. Caroline looked at him, voice soft. "Now it's finished." He stepped toward her, slowly, carefully. "So are we writing something then?" "I think we already are." Outside, the wind shifted. The garden below moved in slow, silent applause. Caroline placed the paper back in the drawer, closed it, then turned to Ben and held out her hand. "Let's go home." He took it. They walked back down the stairs together, through the house they built, not with blueprints, but with forgiveness, courage, and a little accidental magic. Later that night, Caroline lay beside Ben on the back porch swing, stars barely visible through the city's glow. Her head rested on his shoulder, one hand curled into the fabric of his shirt. The world was quiet again. No headlines, no fear. Just heartbeats. "I don't need a ring," she whispered, "or a stage, or a vow in front of people I barely know." Ben kissed the top of her head. "What do you need?" She looked up at him, a smile flickering through tired eyes. "I just need you to stay when the lights are off." When no one's watching, that's enough. I already am, he said. She tucked herself closer. And for the first time in years, Caroline Munro didn't wonder what came next. She just listened to the stillness and let it hold her. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way.